Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, Andrew Dukowitz of Zone Coverage joins me to talk about the Timberwolves offseason, his biggest takeaway from the offseason, and also a couple predictions about the rotation and more. It's all upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. Hopefully you're having a great week so far. Today on the show, I have Andrew Dukowitz joining me. Andrew is from Zone Coverage in the Twin Cities, has a Lynx podcast, covers the Wolves and the Lynx at Zone Coverage. And also, as I found out today, going to cover some Gophers women's basketball this year too. So a jack of all the basketball trades around the Twin Cities is Andrew. He occasionally is on our postcast during the season and has joined me a couple of times this summer. So we chat about quite a few Wolves-related topics. I ask him about his most significant move from the offseason and his opinion what the Wolves either made or didn't make, as well as, talk a little rotation and talk a bit of Western Conference. We're both I'm going to say supremely optimistic about the season for the Wolves. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into that conversation. Enjoy my conversation with Andrew Dukowitz. All right, as promised, Andrew Dukowitz from Zone Coverage joins me. It's been a couple of months. We talked, I guess you were in Vegas when we talked last, right?
Yeah, I was in the 115-degree heat. It feels like a lifetime ago.
It kind of was. On the one hand, it's surprising that we're about to play basketball again. We're like a month away from the opening week of NBA, of regular season NBA, like 2 weeks away from training camp. But on the other hand, Vegas Summer League does seem like a real long time ago. And you cover the Lynx for Zone Coverage, and so you've been watching basketball ever since.
Yeah, it never really dropped off. The Lynx started training camp when the Wolves were in the playoffs. Wolves got eliminated, so I just kept showing up to the Target Center to cover the Lynx, and it kind of goes the same way as the Lynx are in the playoffs now. The Wolves are starting to ramp up, so it's a year-round basketball affair for me. I'm also covering the Gophers women's team this year too, so
nice.
I'll be at the barn once or twice this year as well.
That's awesome. I mean, the Lynx right now, I guess tonight, this is Wednesday's show, so tonight they have game 2 of their first-round series against the Valkyries. So, yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. There obviously a big playoff run, hopefully in store for the Lynx. So I wanted to catch up today, talk a little bit about kind of what we've seen so far this summer, kind of bigger picture. I want to get your thoughts on some stuff as somebody who's around the team a lot, and we haven't chatted in a little while. So a couple of topics related to the summer, a bit of a peek ahead, not like full on predictions, but just a few Wolves topics. I want to start with the summer to this point. And obviously, I guess 12 months ago, it still hadn't been a very eventful summer for Minnesota either. The big Cat Randle trade was late September, or I guess we're nearing the 12-month anniversary of it. But it was a pretty boring summer to this point last year too. So I'm not trying to jinx anything, but given what's happened so far this summer, the draft, some minimal free agency action, movement at the end of the roster, two-way movement, stuff like that. What stands out to you, Andrew, is like the most either surprising or notable, or I guess notable is probably the best word, move or non-move, I guess, of the summer and the offseason so far for the Wolves?
Yeah, I would say the most notable is that they didn't really do anything, which, being around the team, we got to talk to Tim Conley around the draft. I got to talk to Matt Lloyd quite a bit at Summer League, and it sounded like they are pretty confident in this team as currently constructed, meaning, they feel like if they have a full off season to really game plan and scheme for Dante DiVincenzo instead of just trying to figure it out on the fly. Now that Julius kind of knows his role within the offense and what he's going to be asked to do defensively. You look at like Rudy Gobert, he didn't do Euro League this year so that he could get his body right. Ant obviously didn't do Euro ball either and has been just kind of, I think, in a dark zone, no media, no real cell phone, just kind of working out all summer. You look at Reid, Jaden McDaniels, some of the younger guys, and natural progression should give them some hope. So the feeling I got was that they were just very excited to have this core coming back. Everyone's salaries are going to be figured out. You don't have Nas playing on the last year of a deal. You don't have Julius playing with a contract or Rudy playing with contract questions looming. So the vibe I got was that they were really just excited that we are going to have this team that's all locked in. Everyone is ready to go. I say it's the most notable move because I think there was a lot of steam around, upgrading over Mike Conley, and that never ended up coming to fruition, whether that was De'Aaron Fox rumors or Ja Morant rumors or Kevin Durant getting traded here to kind of bolster the starting lineup. But after it was all said and done, it's still Mike Conley and Rob Dillingham. Kind of move forward on that too. Even the last few weeks, there was kind of the murmurs of maybe Malcolm Brogdon's price is lowering and he's willing to accept a lesser role, or, what would Russell Westbrook have to take to come here? And they end up just extending Bones Highland another year and kind of going into the team into the season with this exact same team minus Josh Minot, Luka Garza, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who we all love and adore. But really, it was just notable to me that there was some of this smoke that would come up. And, throughout all of it, the thing that kind of kept coming to my head was in Summer League and at the end of the season, where kind of the powers to be were saying, we really like this team and we really want to see what we can do with a full off season to just get people fitted in better.
Yeah, and I think your Kevin Durant point is the one that stands out. I mean, like overall, the point guard thing is probably the biggest one, and then as far as a non-move, I would say also the Kevin Durant thing, because there was so much smoke around the trade deadline, and there were rumors that he was excited to play with Ant, and then as it turns out, apparently that's not necessarily the case. He didn't want to come to Minnesota. There were so many other layers to this, and ultimately nothing actually happened. And then one of the first points you made related to being able to plan for having Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. I mean, like I said, it right off the top, like it's been not quite 12 months since those guys joined the team. It was like literally 2 days before training camp. And, you mentioned Rudy be doing less this summer. Rudy's first year in Minnesota, he was coming off a Eurobasket. And so like, there's something to be said for a second full year in a place when a move happens late or there's a weird offseason. And Rudy's second year in Minnesota was a lot better than his first one, and the team was much better in year 2 with Rudy Gobert playing with Anthony Edwards. And now you get Julius Randle and also Dante playing with Gobert and playing with Anthony Edwards for the second time, and getting a second, like a true full training camp after an offseason. I think is definitely a positive thing. And there's a lot to be said for continuity. And I think it's easy to overlook that. And obviously losing Alexander Walker hurts, but I feel like some of that gets made up for with the continuity of 7 of your top 8 and 10 of your top 12 are the same guys as they were last year.
Yeah. And it's always like interesting looking back on quotes, right? Where Chris Finch in his exit interview got asked a question about Dante and the Julius Randle trade. And Chris kind of made this offhanded remark of just like, I felt bad all year for Dante because he never had a role. And then you kind of reflect back on it and it's like, he never did. He was playing backup point guard at times. He wasn't really doing the same, like, fly around a screen, get a handoff and just launch a 3-roll stuff that he was doing with New York until the playoffs. And it really kind of seemed almost like a lost season for Dante between the injuries and just not having a fixed place. This year, he's going to have a fixed place. Like, Finch knows how to use him, has thought about how to scheme offensive plays for him. And that's just one example. I think Rudy's going to have a different role this offseason as well. Again, at the end of season exit interviews, Chris kind of said the same thing of just like, we didn't use Rudy this season how we need to use Rudy. Like, he is a lob threat. We need to use him as a lob threat. And I think in the playoffs, especially against Oklahoma City, that was a big complaint amongst fans, at least that I was seeing, was Rudy's not getting lobs. They're not using him to try and dunk over like a shorter Jalen Williams in a mismatch. So I do think the coaching of being able to sit here and know what your kind of hand of cards is and be able to go into the season knowing that all of these guys, what they're good at, what they're not so good at. I mean, Julius, to expand on him too, is he shows up and he has a bum shoulder and barely plays in training camp. And really the first time he gets major minutes is opening night, which it's just difficult. Going down the roster, your point is exactly right. I mean, probably 8 out of the top 10, 10 out of the top 12. When you look at Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark, Rob Dillingham, those guys are all going to be fighting for that 8th spot that Nickeil had last year. And then down the roster even more. I mean, Joe Ingles is, it's probably overused to say like he's a coach on the bench or a player coach, but this team has so much respect for him. And I know he's been really involved with them in like film sessions and stuff like that. You look at even the rookies that they brought in Rocco Zerkarski and Johan, neither of them are really expecting to play this year, which, as again, Leonard Miller, he's not going to have to worry about someone chomping at his heels. Naz Reid isn't going to have to worry about, Luka Garza not getting any minutes every single night. There's just kind of this much cleaner expectation of where everybody's going to fit on this team. And coming into the season, to not have, the worries of getting a payout on your next contract, and not have the worries about your role or what your rotation is going to look like, I think is really going to set this Wolves team up to just kind of hit the ground running immediately.
Yeah, and I mean, continuity and chemistry matter. And the Joe Ingles point is an interesting one. You mentioned Bones Highland earlier. Both of those guys, not players that are going to be relied upon for rotation roles. Both could play a bit role if needed, but those are both guys who are going to help from a vibe standpoint. Again, continuity, I keep using that word, but I think it really does matter. And to have some of that stability as well overall on the roster. We talked a little bit about some of the guys on the bench, Clark, Dillingham, Shannon. We're going to get into the end of the rotation and what that could look like this year next. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the bench and the rotation. We talked about the continuity. We talked about Nickeil being the one guy that's not on the team anymore. And he was a huge part of what the Wolves did. He was effectively the backup point guard. He was actually the 8th man. Obviously, he ended up playing more minutes per game than Mike Conley, but Conley was a starter. And then you go Naz, who was the reigning 6th man of the year, and then Dante DiVincenzo, and then it's Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So with him not in the fold, something I've said along the way here this summer about what I think this looks like is recreating the Nickeil role with some combination of 3 guys, Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark, and Rob Dillingham. Of course, Rob Dillingham is supposed to have the high ceiling of those guys. He also probably has the lowest floor in terms of, is he actually be a plus player when he gets on the floor for Minnesota? And we certainly had some fits and starts last year, and Dillingham was in the rotation. My take sitting here right now is like Terrence Shannon Jr. probably has the inside track based on the steadiness of what he was able to provide last year, even seeing brief rotation minutes in the playoffs for Minnesota. And then beyond that, I think it's going to depend a little bit on, do you need offense? It's Rob Dillingham. Do you need defense? It's Jalen Clark / who's improving, having the hot hand, and where is Chris Finch leaning on any given night or any stretch of games during the season? What's your take as of right now on how the Wolves fill, I guess, the overall Nickeil role of backup point guard, wing defender, all the stuff he did, and he was a bit of a jack of all trades. And then also the actual literal rotation role. The Wolves really only had an 8-man rotation last year. Chris Finch said, I can't remember if it was exit interviews or post game after one of the final playoff games, but he talked about wanting to have potentially a bigger than 8-man rotation this year. Is it an actual 9-man rotation? What's your read or prediction based on what we've seen and heard so far this offseason on how the Wolves handle filling that Alexander Walker role?
Yeah, I think the Alexander Walker role, if I just had to, guess, it's going to be a lot of Terrence Shannon Jr. They are really high on that kid. About midway through the season last year, he started working with Chris Hines, Ant's kind of personal player development coach. He's also the director of player development with the Wolves. And then after that kind of shift in the back end happened, you all of a sudden start seeing Terrence Shannon Jr. get a lot more run on the court. And I'll never forget, like, Chris Finch just kind of described him as this vicious player when attacking the rim. And that's what this team needs. They need someone that can create shots when they're in this mud and they can't get out of the rut. And Terrence Shannon, I mean, if there's one thing he can do, it's create a shot, whether it's at the rim or just getting open because he's so strong. For him, it'll be defense, though. And theoretically, I think you look at him, good size, good footwork. He's an older second-year player. Should be able to play defense. I think in summer league, he kind of proved that against lesser competition, he can definitely play defense, but it's still kind of to be determined. The other part that, Chris Finch did say exit interviews, they kind of mentioned it at training camp as well, that they do want to expand the rotation to like 9.5 guys even. And a big reason they are focused on that is they are fully aware that Mike Conley can't play 25 to 30 minutes a night anymore. Mike, even in his exit interview, said, he feels pretty comfortable playing 15 to 20-ish. And if that's the case, that means there's going to be another 8 to 10 minutes open for that bench role as well. And my guess is that's where Rob is going to come in. I wouldn't expect him to play, 20 minutes a night starting the first game of the season, but I think he'll probably get 8, 10, 12 minutes the first couple weeks of the season. I do think at some point they're going to give him a real chance to make an impact in kind of extended minutes. Partially out of necessity. They don't really have another option unless Dante DiVincenzo playing point guard intrigues someone, but they kind of have to figure out what they have in Rob Dillingham now. And what's really hard is, if you're looking at like his advanced numbers, his assist to turnover is among the worst on the team last year. His turnover percentage, I believe, was second worst out of everyone who played for the Wolves. That's including your PJ Doziers that were here for a cup of coffee. His shot selection is still really tough. And his 3-point shot, I mean, even at Summer League, you saw that disparity just in form, where sometimes he has a massive leg kick, other times he doesn't. Now, he has been in Minneapolis all summer working on it. He is a very driven and dedicated person. I've been really impressed with him every time I've had the chance to talk to him. He just seems like a really grounded, good dude. So I do think there's a world where he overcomes kind of those shortcomings. The other thing is, playing point guard is just hard. It's not like it was 15 years ago where you throw it into Kevin Garnett and then kind of stand on the wing. Now you're kind of distinguishing and diagnosing plays based off of a first pick and roll and how the defense shifts. It's just difficult. So I think the Wolves, if I had to guess, their hope is that TJ can fill in maybe 18 minutes of that Nikhil role. And then Conley, as the season goes on, can go from a starting point guard that's playing 25, 28 minutes to maybe a starting point guard that's playing 15 minutes. And you're just seeing him the first 5 minutes of the game and then like 7 or 8 minutes in the second half. And Rob is just good. Now, the problem with that kind of philosophy is there's also a chance that Rob just hasn't progressed like they want him to. Yep. And that really leaves them in a tough spot this season, because Jalen Clark doesn't really have that ball handling ability. I don't think they have a ton of faith in Bones being able to jump in right away. Tristan Newton, won a championship at UConn, but he's on a two-way for a reason. Enrique Freeman as well. He's on a two-way for a reason. So they're kind of putting all of their eggs in Rob being at least passable this season.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I do think there's also an element of, you mentioned TJ Shannon's defensive abilities and how important that's going to be. Like, he's not a point guard. He didn't really even initiate all that much offense at Illinois. He was just like, take the ball and score type of a guy. But clearly the coaching staff challenged him a little bit in Vegas to try and create a little bit for others. He had, I think, 1 7-assist game in Vegas. Mm-hmm. There could be some almost like, he's more of a wing than anything else, but almost a point forwardy type, like he's looking for his own shot, but if he's making the right reads, he can, draw the attention of the defense in transition and it create offense that way. Not that he's going to run a ton of pick and rolls or anything, but there's also there's a little bit of, you mentioned Finch talking about him attacking the rim. When he gets downhill, he can't create off the dribble like Anthony Edwards can. And I don't even think he necessarily did all that much of that in college. He was catch and shoot, score in transition, maybe some slashing and cutting. But if he can get a dribble handoff and get downhill, there's a little bit of Ant in how he attacks the rim. And I think that then off of that can help create offense for others. But to your point, he's not a pure point guard. Of course, we've also seen by any stretch, he's not a point guard at all. But we've seen Tim Conley kind of go back to this well of not having a backup point guard. It's been a couple of years since there's been a traditional backup point guard, and there's still guys on the Monte Morris is out there, and I don't think the Wolves are super interested in bringing him in. There's an element also of if it's ever going to be Rob Dillingham's time. Now this is still only year 2, so I don't want this to sound like, oh, if he's not on the rotation by Christmas, then he's a bust. That's not what I'm saying. But now is the opportunity for him to show it is his time to then step into a more permanent role moving forward. And if you sign somebody like a Monte Morris or insert other veteran, I'd been clamoring for a Malcolm Brogdon signing, and obviously he's now with the Knicks. But as soon as you do that, then Dillingham goes down a notch in the pecking order. And what you were saying earlier about everybody kind of knows their role. There's those 3 guys that are going to jostle for the 8-9 man rotation spots, but everybody else kind of knows what they're here for. And there's a lot of pros to that. But it is a little bit of a gamble when it comes to that. What's functioning is the backup point guard role.
I completely agree. And it should be said, they didn't have a backup point guard last season and they made it to the Western Conference Finals. I mean, Nikhil could do some things, whether it was pick and roll and drive and kicks. Honestly, in the playoffs, they trusted Julius a lot to just bring the ball down and kind of be a point forward, which worked. It worked against certain matchups. Against Oklahoma City, it certainly didn't, but against LA and Golden State, it did.
Yeah, Finch obviously likes him as a point forward, and he mentioned him doing that when he was in New Orleans with him, and that's something that Chris Finch clearly likes out of Julius Randle. And I think it's an effective way to keep the defense on their heels and also to just get the ball in Randle's hands without having to actually call a play for him. It's just hey, bring it up the floor, and he's a good enough passer to make that work.
The other thing I would just add is, Ant, I can say I know what his to-do list for the summer was. It was figure out your closing game, develop some things that you can go to at the closing of games, be a better playmaker, and make decisions faster. Ant had a homework list a couple of years ago of develop a 3-point shot, and he had the best volume shooting 3-point season last season of anyone not named Curry or Harden. So Ant could just come back and understand the game at a completely different level and take that leap. I do want to say too, Jaden, I know that's probably not, for anyone listening, it's not going to jump off the page for anyone, but he did have quite a bit of success on those little isolation, mid-range, weird little hook shots, weird, I don't know, inside the paint jumper, I think is what Brady was calling them. So there are other ways where they can get some of that creation and just offense, but I do think they're putting a lot of faith in Rob being able to take that role and at least being passable.
All right, let's close by talking a little bit Western Conference, kind of bigger picture. Just curious what your take is on I'm calling it, we'll just do the top 6 of the West because I guess the non-play-in playoff teams in the Western Conference, and just kind of I'm curious to get your take on how the West has shaken out over the summer. And then just a brief mention of the ESPN Future Power Rankings that came out I think yesterday. So we'll do all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get the boost whenever you need it. Again, 17 flavors. There's tons to choose from. And really, all of them are refreshing. They give you a quick lift before a busy day. And the other thing that's great, besides how portable they are and the delicious flavors, is how fast they kick in. Plus, they're sugar-free. You don't have to worry about an annoying sugar crash later on in your day. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. That's 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. All right, so just a few minutes left in the show today, and I wanted to hit the Western Conference overall. I don't know if you're aware of my somewhat passionate take. It's a bit of a zag compared to what everybody's kind of saying. There's a consensus top 3 in the West, top 4 or whatever, and I feel a little differently about it. So I'm just curious regarding the top 6 in the Western Conference. I think in any order, like Minnesota was what? They were the 6th seed last year. Teams ahead of them, the LA teams, everybody's kind of, they're kind of in the same vicinity. Everybody seems to think Houston and Denver have improved this offseason. And I would agree with that, the fact that their rosters certainly have improved their depth. And of course, OKC's at the top. Sitting here right now in mid-September, what's your take on the top of the West? You can actually rank them 1 through 6 if you want, or just kind of give me where you think the Wolves fit into. I'm assuming you think they're in the top 6, but what does that look like in your mind?
So I've been pretty bullish on this almost all offseason of I think Oklahoma City is going to be the clear-cut one. I mean, barring any sort of injury, I don't understand how they would drop off. Everyone's going to be a year better. They seem very motivated to win back-to-back championships and kind of put their name on this new kind of dynasty. But actually, I think the Wolves are going to be the second best in the West.
Okay.
I think that continuity that we saw at the end of the regular season, where these guys were talking almost every practice scrum, every media availability of just that they finally bought in at the end of the season. And I think that's going to start from the jump. I think Ant is going to come back motivated. It shows by how many people have stayed in Minneapolis this summer. Almost everyone on the roster has. And I do think that, no one had really reported on it, but Finch has talked a couple times last year about people having their own independent agendas in the first half of the season. And then after those kind of got put to the side, the team kind of glued. And I think having everyone under contract, I think having that continuity, having clear roles, everyone knowing that, hey, if we buy into this system, it can work and get us to where we want to be. I think this is going to be a Wolves team that hits the ground running and kind of is blowing out a lot of teams at the beginning of the year. Now after Oklahoma City and the Wolves, I would say then you get into that Houston, Denver, Los Angeles Lakers, Golden State, I think is going to be in there with a healthy Steph Curry, a full off season of Jimmy Butler. And then I think the 6th seed is, it could be Memphis, it could be the Clippers, it could be the Spurs for all I know. I think there's kind of that top 5 in my mind. And then there's a little bit of a drop off before you get to the 6th and the play-in team. But I've been pretty bullish that I think the Wolves are going to be that 2nd seed. I just, everything they're saying and everything I'm seeing tells me that they're going to be really locked in at the beginning of the year.
That's interesting. It's funny. So what I've been saying, and your top 5, you had the Lakers in your top 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what seems to be the consensus based on power rankings on various sites and national podcasts is it's OKC by far. And then it's a lot of people have Houston, then Denver, maybe Denver, then Houston, and then Minnesota kind of in the mix. In the 4-5 range, but there are some folks that even have that one or even both LA teams ahead of Minnesota. I think in my mind, I'm really not even all that conflicted about it. I like sitting here right now, I would rank the West as OKC, Denver, Minnesota, Houston. The only reason I would have Denver slightly ahead of Minnesota is because Jokic is Jokic. And they were good last year and their bench was terrible. And they still won one more game than Minnesota, and they still were, 2 games out of the 2 seed. And so I think Denver, I would give them a slight leg up on the Wolves, but I feel similarly to you. I just think it's kind of crazy that the Wolves are just kind of being treated as like, yeah, well, they got to the conference finals again, but who knows if they'll actually be better. And the only thing that really changes is losing Nikhil, which matters, but I think it's more likely that the natural improvement of guys like Ant and Jaden McDaniels and these guys who are a year older, and not to mention a year, like we already talked about, a year in for Dante and Julius Randle, like just being in town, being with the Wolves for a year longer, that's going to matter too. I feel like that outweighs losing to Nikhil Alexander-Walker in my mind. I also think the Houston thing is a little overblown. Like, yeah, they got Kevin Durant and they got Dorian Finney-Smith and they have a deep roster, but like they got this version of Kevin Durant, not OKC Kevin Durant, right? This isn't the Warriors adding Kevin Durant 10 years ago. This is a little bit different. And he hasn't exactly won recently. So I don't know how all of a sudden this makes them like their Houston's Pythagorean win-loss, their point differential essentially had them as at exactly the same as Minnesota, and the Wolves only finished 3 games behind them. So I don't think that like Houston got dramatically better and the Wolves got dramatically worse. I think if anything, Houston got maybe improved a little more than Minnesota. But again, what's that ant leap look like? And you listed a lot of good reasons why I think we can believe in that. So, I mean, I think I would certainly go Minnesota in the top 3. And I mean, I just like last year I picked the Wolves. I think I picked the Lakers to beat the Wolves in the first round in 6 games. And I just got an unbelievable amount of hate for that. People say that I don't believe in the Wolves. And here we are being super optimistic. Both of us having the Wolves in the top 3 in the West sitting here in September. And and that, it's going to be the flip side. It's going to be the, hey, you guys are homers. But like, I completely believe, like completely objectively think Minnesota is a top 3 team in the West makes a ton of sense right now.
Yeah, I've been having to defend myself from being a homer all summer with the Lynx, where they have the number 1 offense, number 1 defense, number 1 net rating, best assist to turnover ratio, second in true shooting. I can continue to go on and on. At some point, if all the stats say they're the best team in the league, they're the best team in the league. And when I'm looking at this Wolves team, they have 3 guys that are still on the ascension in their core lineup of Naz, Jaden, and Ant. All of them have taken leaps every season, whether it's efficiency leaps, whether it's Jaden becoming a rebounder last year, what have you. They've all gotten better. You're in year 2 of having a 4-time All-Star on your team and a 6th Man of the Year candidate from 2 years ago on your team that are now going to have roles. Rudy didn't do Euro ball for the first time in I think it was 17 years he has played in EuroLeague in the offseason. Mike is healthy. You look at the end of the rotation guys, they all have upside. It's hard for me to look at this team, see that they made the Western Conference Finals, and then look at Houston and say, well, Fred VanVleet's on the decline. You look at Şengün. Yes, he could make a leap. The Thompson twin, that I'm forgetting if it's Amar or Asar, but that guy is a defensive mastermind that shows some potential that could take a leap. But then you have Kevin Durant and Fred VanVleet, who are on the wrong side of their kind of pendulum career, if you will. Yep. So I think there's going to be a lot of natural, not progression, the opposite of progression, regression. That's the word. Yeah. So it's just hard for me to pick some of these. Kind of the same argument with the Lakers of what's LeBron going to look like. Yes, there's been a lot of Instagram videos of Luka out there looking in super good shape, but until I can kind of see it and put numbers behind it, I'm just going to take the Western Conference Finals team as the second best team in the league.
That makes a ton of sense. And you mentioned getting off to a hot start. Like the schedule, I've talked about this on the show. It's pretty favorable over the first, 2 months. I think forget what the exact number was, but I think the Wolves will be, in the top 2 in the West by the end of the calendar year. Like the schedule should be not easy, but favorable for the first few months for sure. The travel, not as bad as usual. The back-to-back's not as bad as usual. So all positive for Minnesota. We're not going to get to the ESPN Future Power Rankings today. I'll talk about it on a future edition of Locked On Wolves. But great conversation, a lot to look forward to. We're going to do another one of these as we get closer to the season. Maybe at some point during preseason, we'll do like a future prediction show. Of course, you can always catch Andrew Dukowitz on X. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see his handle there on the screen, but it's at @ADukeMN on X. And of course, writing at Zone Coverage. And Andrew, you have a new podcast as well, right?
Yeah, gentleman Mitch Hansen, who writes for W Insider, and Canis Hoopus, along with Terry Horseman, who covers the links for the Nine. We kind of founded a network and joined forces this year called Hitting the Hardwood. My specific podcast is called the Missing Links podcast, and kind of similar to what you guys do here over at Zone, only for the links, I do post-game live streams as soon as the game's over. It's on my X and the Missing Links YouTube. So if you're into the WNBA and want some more content, you can always check over there and watch that.
Awesome. Wolves coverage at Zone coverage, and also, like you said, Gophers women's basketball coverage too. That should be a fun season this year as well. So appreciate you coming on, Andrew. And like I said, we'll do this again here soon.
Always a pleasure. I appreciate you, Ben.
All right, there you have it. Andrew Dukowitz from Zone Coverage. Fantastic conversation. We'll have him back here in a few weeks. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, we'll be back again tomorrow and Friday, every day, Monday through Friday. You can listen anywhere you get podcasts. You can watch on YouTube. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder about the Locked On NBA Top 100 player list. We talked about it all last week, Monday through Friday. On this show, you can find the reaction to the entire list at Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Of course, the list was formed by the experts that cover these teams and players every single day. Don't miss the reaction across the network. And again, all my shows last week here at Locked On Wolves were based on this top 100 player list. Of course, this show is also part of that very same Locked On podcast network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.